What up, old Uncle 2, back with you once again. All right, in this weekly outlook, we're going to hit 4 assets as we typically do. We're going to hit our normal Bitcoin and S&P. We're also going to take a look at Sol and Intel. And this week's style is going to be a little bit quicker hitting, just give you the weekly outlook, talk about some charts, and then get on to the next. We'll save the in-depth analysis for an in-depth video. Okay, so currently, this is the expectation that we've been outlining on the chart. And since this high, we've been projecting a weaker move to the downside that should create a new relative low to here. Thus far, what we have seen is a very clear 5-wave impulsive wave to the downside with a very clear impulsive subwave structure. So now it's time that we see a completing pattern here and a reaction out of it. It's very important that we assess where we're at. So based on this expectation, that leaves us a few different options. This could be a 1 to the downside, or it could be a C, essentially. But then that would require a different count. And that would insert where this expanding diagonal, which, you know, this is a very interesting expanding diagonal. So this is well within the realm of potentials that should be considered. But this could potentially be W, X, Y. Leave that there. At that degree, and that would just simply leave us into the realm of expectation that, you know, it could be part of a 3-3-5 for a 2-wave off of a 1 diagonal, very outside of typical expectation after a diagonal. So I wouldn't say it would probably have been that. It would be maybe a, and then this would be your B, C to the upside. That would be very strange, very large. So I would say that is outside of the realm of primary expectation, but it's worth considering. So I think we should stick to this idea. There is a world in which it could be a truncated wave to end this whole decline. It's not really what we think. We would have to, if it is a truncation, I would expect that we reverse price the entire length of this air quote truncation very quickly before the end of this week. Don't expect that to happen. That's what I would expect to see if it were a truncation. Otherwise, the fact that we have not created a new low, the fact that it's so small relative to this third wave, and it's smaller than the first wave, and in this sort of price chart, I would expect it to be about this whole thing to be about 618 the length of the 0 through the 3 from this level, which we're not even close. So that tells me that we have simply completed the 1 of this final actionary leg. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something along those lines. You know, we're not going to project for this case. What we need to know for this week is that we likely will create, this has been an A, impulsive subwave off the low, and we should look to see for a B to the downside that gives us a 3/C opportunity of trading to the upside if you're a short-term trader. Look to exit around, start looking at exits around the 1-to-1, the length of this wave, the end of this wave 4, things like that. All right, let's get on to the S&P. Okay, the S&P has done exactly what we've expected it to do over the last, I don't know, month and a half since I started this back up again. Maybe not as long. However, what we did is we made a great low. We made a, you know, ES style motive wave to the upside. And as we laid out last week, it would offer potential opportunity to the long side, which it has done. This price actually, since we are online, we can't see it, but on bar chart, price actually came down right about to this circle. What this tells me is that there's a decent chance that we have, there's a high probability that we have a completed multiple zigzag to this level. And this was a great entry opportunity. However, what it doesn't tell me is if it is the entire corrective wave or only the first leg of some sort of more complex wave, like a flat or a double 3 sideways corrective. The move off of this low is not as clearly motive. Again, we do have this wick to the downside, but we have a clear dividing corrective and another motive to the upside, which could mean that it is a zigzag to the upside. We'll need to pay attention very closely to what price does here. If you didn't catch this, exactly as excited to catch this retracement, but pay close attention. The things that we're going to look for as a potential is, because we see that this was a complex first leg, again, it's very adequate. It could be in time and price. I think that there's a probability, the highest probability is that this is a finished corrective move completely to the downside for a wave 2 or B to this level. However, if there's more complexity to come, what we're going to look for is rejection around this high with momentum divergence, and then the first expectation at that point would be that it would be a flat. But we do see that this is not motive structure to this level. It is corrective structure. If you got in at this low, you're feeling good, even if you return back to these prices. However, depending on how you're playing it, maybe you're already out, maybe you get out here. But however, we'll always continue to be cautious. But I think that you're good. And if you're not in yet, I don't believe that from a pure trading perspective, it's a good opportunity at this moment. This week, I expect that there's a decent chance we'll see some complexity at this degree here. And then we're only on the 15-minute, so it couldn't take that long to play out before we do see a move to this upside, at which point we'll have to determine on our own charts and in the Discord if it has been a corrective to this point or if we are continuing on now to new highs. All right, let's get to Sol. Okay. On Sol, this is the last count that I had for members. As we can see, it went a bit awry at this level. We were hoping for resolution of this wave 3 at this point, that we turn up for a wave 4 that was already pre-marked. This has not been changed before we proceed down for the final actionary leg. As we can see, we have a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. We were working on that 5th for the finish of the 3rd. Now, I think it's probably safe to say that we ended up having the completion of the 3rd around this level here. And that we have, because this only resolved in 3 to the downside, and now this was a clear impulsive wave that is going to, if it hasn't already, made a new low. So I think we can safely say that this was a sideways style of corrective. In this area, an expanded sideways style of corrective, and that now we can proceed on for this 5th wave. And I think that that puts us almost in the same exact position that we just outlined with Bitcoin. And I believe that other charts like Doge and other larger alts that more closely resemble Bitcoin are all sort of in this position. And that's why I wanted to specifically talk about Sol, but use it as a proxy for the rest of these altcoin markets. Let's get out of log. So as we can see, that would be the 1-to-1, the wave 1. That projection looking to be a bit low if this is the 1 of the final actionary. So what we'll do is pull this all the way to the end of this, change that from a 1 to a 618 extension, which brings us to a new low relative to this wave, which is always scary. So, maybe this gets maybe this isn't quite as long as expectation would tell you. And then, of course, we have our other important Fibonacci levels that we should look for to hold it up. We don't have a lot of structural support to go off of. However, we do have this. And these. So I think that, honestly, I would prefer to currently target I would say we'll keep an eye on this 618 retracement zone. That feels like a good spot. Just creates a new low, which is very standard, especially when we haven't created a new high on this expansive wave. So that would very much put us in the position that a 1-to-1 projection for this wave would take us to a new low right to the 618, actually between the golden corner pocket. So that's where we're going to expect. So then same thing as Bitcoin. But again, we have, let's go down to the 15-minute, we can project that it's fairly likely that we've completed an impulsive wave to the downside. The move off the low is a 1 or an A to the upside. So a very tradable event, because then you could take it for a 3/C, and that's what we do here in the Discord at WaveLab. Is we target 3s and Cs. Now, this is, where is this out here? Potentially as a triangle, we'll see. Still very strong indication this is a 1 or an A off this low, giving you that 3C opportunity. We expect it to be a C, right? So then something along these lines, and then you would continue down for that third to make that final low. Can't get down there, but something like that, right? So probably more something like this. That's what we're going to look for on all of the markets in the crypto sphere, that the bigger alts are following Bitcoin. All right, let's get on to Intel. I know that Intel is not going to be the most popular choice with our crypto-based audience. However, I know that there's a good amount of you guys that are into trading the stonks. And as you can see on this chart, there's a great reason why you should be if you are not. This has been one of the Discord favorites. We caught this down here in this accumulation range low for the members and have been riding it ever since. I personally rebalanced all of my silicon positions. I won't say exactly at the high, it wasn't, but on strength, just because they obviously were outperforming other parts of the portfolio. Now, this is a weekly outlook, so we don't need to talk about the larger term perspective. However, what we see is that we had some news at the end of last week on earnings. The earnings beat, but then there was some, let's just say, FUD around them. And what we see is simply a great opportunity. Now, I would say this is not the opportunity to buy at the resolution of this wave. However, the way it's playing out is very much, very, very much the first leg of a corrective move after a strong impulsive wave. So you may be panicked about how sharp this move is to the downside. I would say don't be. It's very typical of a wave. So what we would like to see is that when it does resolve, we're not going to call for its resolution. It's pre-market here when we're doing this weekly outlook on Monday. And it's still showing weakness to the downside. We're not going to call that, we're not going to even speculate on the low for that move in this video. However, we can say that if we come down here to the 1 hour, when it does resolve, we should expect to see, just like we're talking about on Sol, a 2/B to the upside, which in this case, we would think it very much be a two-way or B wave. But then to the downside, that could potentially give you a trade opportunity for a 3/C. But what it very much does is gives you, when that finishes, an even bigger 2/B to take to this side. So we're going to be looking for that. So short opportunity in the near term on Intel, maybe as soon as this week. Potentially takes a little bit longer for this 2/B to play out since this has been so fast. But we'll go ahead and keep an eye on it. Very interesting chart and very interesting price action. Very much following the Elliott wave theory. All right, boys, that's it for the outlook this week. A little bit faster pace. Let me know how you like it. Toot out.